Welcome to Founders Future, a podcast powered by Closers.io, where we dive into the journeys of innovative entrepreneurs and explore the road ahead for them and their companies. I'm your host, Mishal Saeed, and in each episode, we uncover the stories behind impactful ventures, the challenges faced along the way, and really the strategies driving their future growth. Today, we're thrilled to have George Kriza, the CEO of Challenging Decisions, joining us. George brings over 40 years of experience in technology and leadership, having scaled multiple companies like MTC Performance by 470% and has developed enterprise class software for multi billion dollar firms. Through challenging decisions, he helps CEOs of small and mid sized businesses explore and solve complex management and growth challenges with clarity and actionable solutions. We'll explore his journey, how challenging decisions is transforming consulting, and really his vision for scaling this impactful business. So let's dive in. George, welcome to Founders Future.
Thank you very much, Michelle.
All right, now let's kick things off for the listeners. George, take us back to the beginning. What specific problem within the business consulting or software development landscape, perhaps around organizational dysfunction or scaling challenges, inspired you to start challenging decisions to begin with?
You'll notice in the upper left of my screen that I have the Inc. 500 here. So prior to founding Challenging Decisions, I founded, operated, and sold eventually MTC Performance. And that was when we, in fact, had the 473% growth curve. And that was due to a revolutionary concept that I brought to the sales incentive industry. And in the past, everyone used to run sales incentive programs, let's say one at a time, and every manager had a different way of doing that, and every company as well. And some of the large receivers of sales incentives, like CDW as one example, Ingram Micro as another example, both very large, successful organizations, they had these incentives being pointed at them from a million different directions. And we built a program that would add a business process management cycle to that and also a workflow cycle. No one had done that before, and as a result, we grew their incentive flow by as much as 10 times in a matter of 1 to 2 years. So it was a very exciting period of time. So what did I learn throughout that period? We learned how to build not only incentive, but enterprise class software. The demands of enterprise class software are very severe demands. The reliability has to be incredible. The usability has to be really good. And so it needs to be fundamentally very reliable. So moving from the simpler environment to the more complex environment required my organization to grow and change quite dynamically. So that was a huge learning experience. I spent a lot of time studying Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm and inside the tornado so that we could leverage that. And then, and by the way, if you have a fast growing company, you really want to study crossing the chasm and inside the tornado because it helps you deal with incredible amounts of challenges as well as taking advantage of being the first mover in a space and growing very rapidly through that space. On top of all of that, the organization needs to shift and change. The culture needs to grow. The culture needs to be very strong because it's a period of intense focus, intense work, and making a huge jump to the enterprise class delivery cycle. So we did all of those things. And to your point, that means we had to learn all about top level software development. We had to learn about getting financed. We had to learn about payments, by the way. We are experts on payments. Culture became a cornerstone of the way we operated the company, and execution, because you really have to be good at execution as well. So I hope that gives you a little bit of background in terms of how I grew through that period and really developed something powerful to offer to our clients.
Love that. Yeah. And I mean, I can tell from really that Inc. 500 accomplishment, you focused on all areas of like business executions. Let's get into the nuts and bolts, really, for our listeners, even potential clients tuning in. I would love for you to walk us through how challenging decisions today generates revenue. What's your core offer? What are some of the services that you offer? I know you do management consulting, software solutions. How do you structure what you do for your clients, such as some of the SMBs or mid market companies you work with?
We do three or four different things. One is an executive coach, you might say, which is a very cost-effective way to begin an engagement. A consulting project can become very expensive over time, but as an executive coach, we're looking at probably about $25,000 a year to leverage at least several times a month, collaboration, cooperation to help CEOs through some of the challenges they're facing. And that would be sort of a generalized coaching solution. Then we would have specific projects that might involve working with a client that has a software project underway or is beginning to undertake a big software project. And frankly, it's all new to them, and they need some help on understanding various types of pitfalls and traps. There's a famous expression that software always takes twice as long and costs twice as much. If you really are new to that, it could often be that would be the best case scenario. So then another issue that a lot of our clients are very interested in is getting financing. Newer businesses, fast growing businesses, one thing that you may not understand, not you personally, but any CEO may not understand is that rapidly growing businesses consume cash. It would be wonderful if they were self-funding and self-sustaining, but in fact, when you have to, let's say, hire ahead and build the organization, you have to make investments in software. It's very expensive, even with the new approaches. So, we can engage and work with them on a project basis and continue to help them solve those problems. So, finance, software development, ongoing coaching, all could come into play.
Love that. So from what it sounds like, there are 3 to 4 main core offerings that you deliver on, from like finance, software development, and then the coaching. Now, whenever we have guests on here, we always like to find out more about really what's the revenue driver for the business. Now, in your experience and everything that you've grown so far, where are you seeing the most traction right now in terms of clients wanting to work with you? Is it more on like the coaching side, or is it more on like the project-based engagements, such as software and like the financing side?
I would say over and over it comes up that finance is a problem for new CEOs. Raising capital and having, I've approached that a number of different ways myself personally for my prior business. We created a investment with a $2 billion company investing into our company for a 10% share. That was a big moment. We were able to work with convertible subordinated debt, and we were also to make presentations to over 50 venture capital, private equity, growth capital, all the different drivers, angel investors. And also, by the way, I've been privileged to make angel investments myself. I have some degree of expertise in that field. And a lot of times there's billions of dollars on the sidelines waiting to be deployed,
Right.
but it's by no means easy to meet the criteria that these various investment firms have. That criteria can be very focused, very stringent, and very much not you. So you have to pick the right market segment to go after, and you have to be realistic in terms of your company valuation. You have to be realistic about the timeline to invest. It is so rare for one of these types of firms to make an investment when you first need it. So you may have to work 3 months, 6 months, a year before you attract the kind of capital you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from what it sounds like, really, in essence, a lot of your audience and a lot of your reach has been more like the demand is really the finance side of things, like really figuring that out on the investment side. And you've been seeing a lot more of your business kind of grow in that direction with taking on more of those like finance project based engagements, from what it sounds like.
Yeah, that's correct.
Really kind of building on your growth, how are you currently acquiring some of your clients today? What are some of those channels, whether it's LinkedIn, referrals, paid ads, social media? What are you doing right now to get leads through the door for some of the services you offer?
We've used LinkedIn. We've used services, outsourced services to manage that process. That's been moderately successful. I wouldn't say tremendously successful, but at some point it becomes your ability to network, your ability to just meet more people, meet more CEOs, have open and honest conversations with them, find out what they're struggling with. And if you can find those kinds of conversations, that has helped us to attract our clients.
Love that. So, from what it sounds like, you're doing a lot of networking. Word of mouth seems to be a lot of where you're getting that traction. And then you've tried LinkedIn as well. Now, what specifically are you doing on LinkedIn? And there are a lot of different approaches to it, like thought leadership, and then also doing some cold outreach. What are some of those tactics and strategies you're doing on LinkedIn to consistently drive some of those leads as you start to leverage that as a platform?
That continues to evolve, and even in the present tense, we're continuing to try and evolve that to include more and more artificial intelligence. So not only identify the target market, but crafting the typical approach would be to craft a sequence of communication. The problem is right now, today, I would say there's a problem, and I see it on the inbound side. Every single day, someone's reaching out to me to sell me something, this or that service, and a lot of them are lead services. And differentiating yourself one from the other is very difficult. And then at the same time, when you think about working with CEOs have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. They're very busy. And at the
Mm,
same time, when you think about it, they just have they don't necessarily want to freely reveal what they're really struggling with. So for my consulting company to get traction with someone, we have got to get to the point where they're going to open up with us. And so that LinkedIn strategy has to be progressive, but as soon as possible, we want to get out of LinkedIn and we want to get into actual conversations with the potential client. And that's where the traction comes in. Because realistically, with someone like myself, with as much experience as I have, I am inherently highly differentiated from a lot of people that are doing what we do. And conveying that comes across very rapidly in a conversation, an actual conversation. And
yeah.
it's much more difficult to convey that even in some sort of sequential communication efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the things we've had so many guests on our show express really that same thing is like, how can we actually start to break through and have those conversations, especially with some of those decision makers and some of those C suite stakeholders that are on LinkedIn, but they're not going to be as open with talking about those pain points and those challenges, or even sometimes even having problem awareness to begin with. Now, sometimes even with like word of mouth and referral, it can be a little bit up and down, not as predictable and consistent in terms of like really generating some of those leads. What are some of those strategies that you've been exploring with challenging decisions to make client acquisition more reliable? What are some of your thoughts on it? How are you navigating that as like a business owner?
Yeah, thank you. So that's a really good question. And one of the things I found to be the most effective of all is partnering with people that are highly energized and looking for clients for their own business. Now, their business may not be a consulting business exactly, but there are some people that are just supercharged in client acquisition. And by partnering with people that are supercharged in client acquisition, opportunities present themselves in rapid fire scenarios. And I found a few of those people that I've partnered up with. And by doing that, the burden really doesn't fall on me. So they're identifying clients that are in need.
Yeah.
And then once they understand my technical skill set and consulting skill set, they pull me in rapidly into the conversation. And that is proving very effective.
Love that. No, from what it sounds like, you're exploring new perspectives, outside expertise to really kind of help gain some of that momentum on the acquisition side. Now, on that subject of really having those conversations when it comes to sales, would love to learn about your approach to having sales conversations. Let's say someone does come in through some of the acquisition channels that you have set up, whether it's LinkedIn or through word of mouth. How are you actually having those conversations right now and converting them into long-term clients? And are you doing this on your own right now, or do you have someone else in your sales team helping with either the outreach or just even engaging in those discussions?
Let me answer that in 1 minute because I think we left something out, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go
Uh,
ahead.
I do have a YouTube channel of my own.
Mm,
And so I have one of my strategies, and I think this is interesting and relevant, is I've been able, in my career, I've made the acquaintance of quite a number of very nationally known top tier executives.
mm,
And so I've begun to interview such high caliber executives on
mm,
my podcast on YouTube.
mm,
And when we talk about differentiation, and I don't think you can let go of the differentiation, when you can create differentiation by playing at the level of people like Jeffrey Moore, who I did a 1 hour interview with, and a number of other people equally nationally known. I think that creates a demonstration of credibility, a demonstration of where you can play at that high level. That when you have these selling conversations, then you're in a position to make a difference right away where people can recognize who you are. Now that took you backwards, why don't you just repeat that last question that you had?
No, I love that. I mean, I can tell, like, really just through your own podcast right now, you're able to really get inside the minds of some of these like leaders, some of these CEOs essentially, and find out a little bit more about what's happening. So, what is that approach to sales? How are you having those sales conversations? How are you actually converting some of those leads that do come in through some of those channels you've set up? Are you doing it on your own right now? Is it just you having those calls, or do you have someone else as well in your team also engaged in really that aspect of the business?
So it would, if there is a call to be had, it's me that will have the call. Uh, Again, I told you that I partnered with other people that are growing their businesses,
Mm,
and their businesses have maybe a different feel than mine does,
mm,
and yet they're uncovering opportunities. But if
mm,
the question is, what's the conversation like once we have a viable prospect in
mm.
front of on the other end of the Zoom or the other end of the telephone?
Yeah.
The type of conversation is very non-salesy. It's here's who I am, here's what I do, and I'd like to understand both something about your business, maybe tell me a little bit about yourself personally, but I really want to understand those areas that you find to be pressure points.
Mm,
And if we uncover a pressure point, whatever it may be, then because I have relevant experience,
mm.
I'm not shooting blanks, if you understand the point. I'm not just guessing at what they're talking about. I know what they're talking about. I know what they're going through. And I can only tell you that I want to make that come across in that conversation so that they feel the empathy that I have for them. I have
Yeah.
a lot of empathy for people struggling with business issues because I've lived it.
Yeah.
I've not only theorized it. I've not only read a book about it, I've
Mm,
lived it. And for example, a real big part of the way I approach business is
mm,
based on things that I learned from Patrick Lencioni. If you've
mm,
ever heard of Four Obsessions of an Extraordinary Executive, Five Temptations of a CEO, and then another very influential book was Four Disciplines of Execution. And a lot of times CEOs struggle with accountability. They
mm,
struggle with accountability for themselves. They struggle with accountability for their team. And then they struggle with knowing exactly what button to push.
mm,
So I'm trying to identify which of those things as early as possible, and then try and deploy either the personal interview with them, get on site with them, meet with their team, and try and very rapidly solve the problem or give them ideas. It's not that I can solve every problem. They have to solve the problem, but they don't necessarily know exactly what they're doing wrong or what course correction they need to make.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. And that's the best part about it. What you just mentioned is like having that empathy and really becoming, you have that differentiation. So you're able to really have those conversations, really find out more on a human to human level. Hey, what is actually happening? What are some of those gaps from what it sounds like? Now, your growth has been incredible. Obviously, with challenging decisions, you're well on your way, setting up a good runway for this year. If there was like a bottleneck that stood out, what would it be? Is it attracting some of the right types of leads you want to work with, finding that ICP, increasing some of the conversions? What are you most focused on solving to keep all of the momentum going into this year?
Yeah, just talking to more people, getting out, getting acquainted. I started this business pretty much during COVID. I
Mm.
sold my prior business in 2018, and I was with the prior company until 2021. As COVID began then, and so we went through what, 3 straight years virtually of everything being pretty locked down and pretty tight.
Yeah.
And getting these in-person meetings and taking that time to have these real conversations in a moment and a time when the CEOs are ready for it.
Mm.
And so, yeah, so we're working on that. We're trying to have more conversations every week.
Mm.
And in doing so, we certainly hope to add an adequate number of clients to continue growing.
Love that. Help the listeners understand, if you can, some of those strategies that you're implementing to have more of those consistent conversations on a week-to-week basis. As you mentioned, what are some of those ways you're exploring that right now as you look at scaling the company and really growing the vision for the next 6 to 12 months?
There's some really interesting vectors that you can follow that might be kind of non-conventional. For example, I ended up making an angel investment in a really interesting business, and I think for the moment I'm not going to mention it, but a really interesting business that's about to hit and become very successful.
Mm.
And they're looking for additional capital.
Wow.
And so what did that cause me to do? That caused me, because they're on the threshold of going live with their solution, I ended up calling about 20 of my business associates over the last 20 years and having a discussion about this investment opportunity.
Mm.
Quite interestingly, and I think it follows with what I've been telling you all along, because I'm the one making the call and because they know I'm not wasting their time.
Yeah.
I would say out of about 20 individuals that I personally called from my own, let's call it the ancient rotary file, right? From my database, but it's not the data, it's personal contacts that are running businesses, that are high net worth individuals, that are in a position to make an investment. And then you can actually segue that kind of conversation into, how can I do something for you? What are you struggling with right now? What are you working on right now? And a matter of fact, that same company that I just mentioned that's
Mm.
looking for capital, they're in Chicago, and I was down meeting with their management team in person, and I actually helped them completely restructure their investor presentation. And so, there's your foot in the door in terms of finding a new opportunity. It's often good to actually do something simple,
Mm.
relatively cost effectively, if not for free, just so you
Yeah.
can really demonstrate your level of expertise. So I did that as well.
Love that. Love that. I mean, from what it sounds like, you're leveraging your network, really tapping in and leveraging a lot of your own past experiences to get your foot in the door, as you said, and really provide a lot of that value up front. One last question as we're in the lightning round. Would love to learn about really your vision for 2025 as you look to grow challenging decisions over the next 6 to 12 months. Paint that picture for us. What are some of those goals? Any revenue targets, performance targets that you're looking to hit? What does all of that look like?
We have revenue targets. I don't know that I feel like sharing them on the podcast, but yeah, I mean, we're trying to grow. I would say we'd like to grow over 100% this year. And so we're putting those building blocks in place to do that.
Mm. Love that. I know you're not going to share with the listeners, so that's all good. We know that it's an ambitious target from what it sounds like, and we're going to be rooting all the way from the sidelines. Now, for the listeners, entrepreneurs, founders that are looking to follow in your footsteps, one last piece of advice you can give to them on really kind of scaling a consulting business, what would you say on one parting note?
I I would say that there's no substitute for staying active.
Mm,
You, anytime you're starting a new business, you have to put in the time and the personal effort and energy. Yes, you can outsource lead generation services, but what you can't outsource really, realistically, is in this type of business, you can't outsource the follow-up. So once you have that initial conversation with the CEO, you have, it's just like selling any other thing. And if we've learned anything, it's a rule from advertising that's been true for years and years. And I don't know if you've ever heard this rule, but this is a really valid rule.
mm,
If you're looking in any publication, let's just pick a magazine for the sake of argument. You're reading a magazine, an advertiser has to place an ad in that magazine something like 7 times before you really see it, before it resonates. Now, how many times do they have to, in other words, you have to see it 7 times before it really sinks in? That was the
yeah,
point. How many times do they have to run the ad
mm,
for you to see it 7 times?
yeah,
21 times, 25 times.
yeah,
So, what does that mean? You're not making enough of an impression until
mm,
you saturate the
mm,
target market with your message. And
mm,
so it's the same thing with trying to get a consulting client is you just have to either meet them in person or get them on the phone and have a quality conversation, follow up with email, and then you want to get to that point where you have really conveyed your value proposition. And then the chips will fall where they may. If they have the need, hopefully you've built up trust, you've built up credibility, and off you go.
mm. Love that. Wow. What powerful wisdom right there coming from the man who went on to the Inc. 500 list. Wow, incredible. And hopefully challenging decisions very soon is going to make that get to that level as well. Love it. On that note, that wraps up another inspiring episode of Founders Future. George, thank you so much for joining us, really sharing your remarkable journey and insights with us today from really scaling MTC Performance by 470%, making the Inc. 500 list, and now you're helping so many different CEOs achieve clarity through challenging decisions. We're excited to follow the journey along as you head into this year and start to create the vision as well for early 2026. So, to our listeners, if you would like to get in touch and work with George, we will link his LinkedIn profile below in the summary. And if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe to Founders Future wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. You can also find some more resources and insights at closers.io, where we're dedicated to helping businesses accelerate their growth through trained appointment setters and world-class sales systems. Until then, everyone, keep climbing, and we will see you all on the next one.